As you begin to work with the channels of your life, whether it's a client, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, etc., the very important thing is to really let them be the biggest channel possible. You have to not see them as merely a limited human being. You can't judge based on where they seem to be. Just like you cannot judge your bank account for how much abundance you have because the dollar bills are symbols, they're not real wealth. Well, likewise, wherever that person's at, whether it's a client and you want to charge more, but they feel like they don't have enough to pay and you feel like, oh my God, I'm taking something from them. The way you hold them and allow them to see them as a big and an infinite channel, the same way that you are, that determines how much they're able to allow to flow into their life and to flow back to you through that transaction. Now, there's a really powerful study that proved this. There was a school where they did this study, and they took a bunch of kids from a pool of kids, just average students. There was nothing particular about them. And they broke them up into 3 groups. There was the control group, which was just the average students. There was another group where they told the teacher, these are below average students. And there was another group where they told the teacher, these are above average. These are like some of the best students in the school. So there was 3 different teachers. One thought these were average, one thought they were below average, one thought they were above average. All the same pool of kids, right? At the end of a period of a semester or 2, they went back and they tested all these kids. And they got the final results, the grades, the tests. The ones that were in the average pool were still testing about the same. Average. Nothing really had changed. That's the control group. The ones that the teacher believed they were below average, they were testing below that median. They were below that baseline, some of them significantly. The ones where the teacher, and it was consistent enough, it was a statistically consistent sample. The ones where they were believed to be above average, they had scores that were some of the highest in the whole district. Now what changed? All the same kids, but the teachers believed these were average kids, these were below average, and these were above average. And so how they spoke to them, how they saw them, the box, the frame they held them in, determined how high the child would rise or how low they would sink. They would shrink to fit the small box, or they would rise to fit the bigger box. Now, why is this important? When you're working, let's say, with a client, and you have you're feeling like it's time to raise your rates, or even to charge at all. For some of you heart-centered, spiritually minded people, you just give your stuff away. And you're like, yeah, but these poor people, I don't want to be it's like taking money from a child, or it's like, they got to put food on their table. I don't want to take that from them. In that moment, you have just put them in the below average section. Do you see that? The way you're seeing them puts them in a box that is, first of all, a lie, and it's false, because hopefully you're learning this now. There's a source of infinite possibility. There's never a lack of resources, but there can be a lack of resourcefulness. And the ability to be more resourceful is based on the box you put someone in. If you put a child in a little box, they've tested this with children in other ways, where you see very little potential, they shrink to fit. When you see the grand potential, they rise to fill. And so when you see a client as being poor and broke and they don't have enough, then you actually are creating a very small box that if they're not more conscious than you, you're literally performing a form of malpractice on them. I know it's kind of harsh, but it's like a spiritual, psychological malpractice, because you are seeing them as small and they shrink to fit that, at least in terms of your relationship. But if you're willing to stand in the truth you're learning here and see them as the infinite individualized expressions of life and abundance that they are, tuned in and tapped into the same source of infinite creation, infinite possibility, now you've created a space. And if you're a transformational coach, even before you've sold them anything, you are now being a transformational agency or agent. You are turning that transactional relationship immediately into a transformational one. And you can begin to look at them when they say, oh, I can't afford it. I don't know. You can say, well, do you want it? Do you feel that yes? Do you want to say yes to your yes? Then step into it and prove and discover just how resourceful you really are. Because you have just as much connection to source as anybody does. And you can begin to talk to them that way with confidence. There's no manipulation. You're not trying to get anything from them. You're actually holding them and seeing them and meeting them as who they really are. And they will begin to be able to blossom to that if they're willing. So how you hold them is everything to whether or not they're able to play with you at that higher level, play with you, and pay for it with you. And then ultimately, you create a transformational space even before you've begun the transformational work, where they can begin to grow and blossom in ways that neither of you ever imagined. So this is a powerful, powerful paradigm to begin to bring. And you never have to feel guilty anymore when you ask for what you want or you charge what you're worth. You know that it's not coming from them. It's coming from you, but it's coming through them. And now as you hold them as that big channel and they're willing to play and circulate back to you, their channel gets bigger. And now they have more abundance, more power, more access in their own life. Are you starting to get this? I mean, can you see the service that you give somebody when you're willing to meet them that way? And ask for what you want and charge what you're worth, because you're actually giving them an opportunity to be a bigger channel. You start to get excited about that point in the conversation where many of you get nervous and scared and guilty. You're like, well, okay, so now we gotta talk about how much it costs, and you're like all fumbling over it, and then you start talking yourself out of it, right? How would it feel if you never ever had to feel that way again? If you could stand with somebody so strongly, asking for what you want, really owning that and owning it for them, knowing that it's just creating a space where they could grow and rise in ways they've never imagined. Doesn't that feel good? That's what that kind of transactional interaction is going to begin to feel with. Whether it's charging something, asking your boss for a raise, asking your children to do more around the house, or asking your spouse for something, you're going to start to know that nobody is your source, everybody is your channel. And by the way, that means that all the good that's showing up in your life, whether it's your spouse bringing home the check, if you're enjoying that abundance, it means it's an activity of your consciousness. And that it's because of your consciousness that these things are showing up. Even if they're coming from other channels, you are the source of everything in your universe.